Oh, well, there. Good? So this is not related to any of this. However, I woke up this morning at 3 in the morning to sirens blaring and lights flashing in the window. And I knew they were fire trucks. There was one after the next, one after the next, one after the next. And I figured something very serious was happening. And then I laid in bed a little longer, maybe I'd go back to sleep. And then I started hearing chainsaws buzzing. And I realized something was really wrong, and it was also very close. 2 doors, 3 doors down, neighbor's house is on fire, completely on fire. And these are all row houses, they're all connected. So it was so traumatic, so intense. All the neighbors were out. So many firemen, just so many, just cutting the roof open, smashing the windows of their house, the neighbor's house, smoke everywhere. And it was a very strange start to the day.
Yeah, you are.
And here I am. And here I am. I'm Tony Matelli. I'm an artist, and I live and work in New York City. I became interested in art and became interested in being an artist pretty early on, as a teenager maybe, even a young teenager, preteen. And when I was a kid, I was always in a kind of imaginal world. I didn't like school very much. I daydreamed all day. I would come home, I wouldn't do schoolwork. I would find an object in the house, and I would imagine that object was something else. Something maybe it resembled, something maybe something else. Like a little salt shaker would become a boat, and the tablecloth would become waves, and that's what I did. And then I became interested in building models and creating little dioramas, essentially world building, you know? And I projected ideas onto those things. And so through that, I think I became interested in art, because that also occupied an imaginal world. I was interested too in architecture and things like in the creative realm, but I soon came to understand that architecture just involved too many other people. I didn't have the skill set, I knew that. I wasn't good at math. It became clear at a certain point that being an artist was the kind of the only course that I could take. So I guess in a way, it wasn't really a choice, it was a process of elimination. Being an artist is great because it allows me to think, actually think. Think about nothing in particular, even, it allows me to daydream, and it allows me to kind of indulge flights of fancy in a way that just nothing else can, I see being an artist as almost a kind of resistance in a way. I didn't think about this when I wanted to be an artist. I think about this now. It came to me over time. That this is a kind of resistance, a way of being in the world without really participating in the world, in a sense. Not participating in the economy in a real way. Not contributing to something else that's outside of my own interest. Picking and choosing what ideas I want to entertain and what I let into my head and what I put out into the world. When I got to New York, one of the first sculptures I made is a work called Lost and Sick. And it's a kind of tableau of 3 Boy Scouts. And the 3 Boy Scouts are all sick, and they're in a kind of landscape. So this refers very specifically to the dioramas I was making as a kid, right? So when you build a model, like a little diorama, it's a diorama. You make it life-size, what does it become? It becomes a sculpture in a sense. So this was a sculpture of 3 lost Boy Scouts, and they were all vomiting. So there was an older Boy Scout, he was bent over, and there were kind of 3 stages of life. It occurred to me that was a sculpture of rejection, And then I made the weeds, and that was also a kind of work about rejection on some level. And I didn't know it then, so I learned what those works were about to me over time. 30 years later, I now look back and I say, oh, this is about resistance in a sense. This is about saying no to a certain way of living or a certain way of making a living or a certain way of thinking about the world, about myself in the world. Thinking about it now, that seems quite clear what that statement was. I chose to work with sculpture because when you're in art school, you have to choose a field. You have to kind of choose a lane, a major, let's say. So in painting, I knew that you could only make paintings in the painting department. But in sculpture, it was before there were video programs or anything like this, and it just felt so much more open. And also, sculpture just seemed to have more, it was harder. And it took up space, it took up my space. And I just engaged with it in a different way, in a bodily way. You move around it. You reckon with something that's taking up your space differently. It resists decoration more than anything else because it can't just sit on the wall. It can't just stay there. You can't really ignore it in the same way. I had kind of a pivotal moment when I was young. We didn't have much art culture where I was growing up, but we had a museum like in the big city, an hour or two away. Went there, saw a great the pop art room. There was Alex Katz painting, Alfred Jenny painting, a couple other paintings, and then you turn the corner and there was a Duane Hanson sculpture of a janitor, and at that moment I saw that and I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that it wasn't real. I couldn't believe that it wasn't looking back at me or anything like this. You had almost like a out-of-body experience when I was looking at it. And then when I regarded everything else that was in that room, that was the cats and everything else, all of those things just felt like they were signs. They were like signals pointing to something, but not the thing. And the Duane Hanson in that moment was startling and powerful because it felt like it was the thing. It felt like it was the embodiment of the idea without any silliness, without any mediation or art stuff, and so that's been kind of the guiding light in the way I make work, is that it must resist artiness. It must have a direct, clean language, It has to have no style. I like making things, and I like learning new skills. I'm an autodidact, I guess, in that way, so that's fun to me. And I like developing proficiency, I guess. I like surprising myself when I learn how to do something successfully. I'm not like a perfectionist. I'm not a fetishist in this way. This is why I don't think I fit into that hyper-realist camp. It doesn't have to be that good. It needs to only be good enough to get the thing really, really sharply done, I always thought that I was a kind of romantic artist, like what I'm trying to do is get across a feeling that I have, that because I have it, I think you will have it. And because I'm joyful about it or terrified about it, this is where the empathy comes in. I want you to have that same reaction. And through that, we're having a conversation, even though I'm not there, and I'm not interested in changing anything. don't think that that's imperative for art at all. I think new experiences change people in general. I have never felt that I had a moral obligation to do anything. I'll resist that forever. I want to do what I wanted to do. You know, that's the benefit of being an artist. I think that artwork that reflects too narrowly on a contemporary issue or a political theme or something like this, it is doomed to be boring or doomed to fail. You know, what is the motivation of something like that? To change the world? You got to be kidding me. That's not what's going on here. That's certainly not what's going on here. I want to participate as much or as little as I want in that world, and you know, under my own terms. That's what being an artist is. Being an artist is being a model for the rest of society on how you can live a life. That to me is what's exciting about being an artist. I'm not saying that like this is that my model is like aspirational to someone else, but you can choose to engage with whatever you want. You can live in an imaginal world where, you know, in whatever way you want. I have the luxury of being engaged in every little thing I wanted to do, you know, like I was saying earlier. And that someone else should be able to look at and say, that is a cool way to live. You know, I can do this or I could choose not to do that. You know, a lot of people never even thought that those were options for them. If art or artists is political in any way, or, you know, that, I think it's political in that way. I think that the very nature of making art is a moral act in and of itself, just by the fact that I believe that there's a communication going on. That in and of itself is a humanistic endeavor. The message going on with all of that is irrelevant to me. It's the practice of the thing that is, to me, the politics of it, you know? I think there are two sides to me. There is what you see as a fastidious and demanding maker of things, let's say, right? And there's another casual, not casual, but I want the work to feel casual, in a sense, you know? I approach it casually. I want it to feel incidental. I'm very serious about certain things, and about other things I choose absolutely not to care about. It's hard to talk about like, oh, how did you become this? You know, how did you come to approach things in this way? I have an allergy to self-seriousness, not seriousness, self-seriousness. And I can read it in a work. I can spot it a mile away. You've done interviews with some of these artists, you know? And you see it and you're like, okay, you're serious, I can tell. But you're telling me that you're serious, you know? You're not taking me on the thing.